Welcome to Travel Sketching and Mixed Media. I'm Mark Taro Holmes. I'm excited to be back here at Craftsy, sharing my passion for sketching on location. In this class, I'll be teaching the expressive drawing techniques I've developed over years of traveling the world with a sketchbook. I'm currently based in Montreal, Canada. My passion for spontaneous drawing and exploring the world through art has taken me all over, sketching as I go. Since 2008, I've been part of a wonderful group serving as a board member, a blogger, and workshop instructor for the nonprofit urbansketchers.org. So in these 7 lessons, we'll cover a range of approaches, from elegant observational sketches in line to bold silhouette drawings with the brush pen. We'll practice textured mark making with different line weights and show you how to bring everything to life with vibrant color washes. We'll talk about composing page layouts and how to design your sketchbooks on the fly, making your pages tell stories. And in the advanced lessons, I'll show you how to easily apply the skills you've learned in our simple exercises to making beautiful paintings in watercolor. So let's get started. So there are as many ways to draw as there are artists, and you're all going to develop your own individual style. And that's the goal, to express yourself. But we're talking about travel sketching, working on the go. So I'm going to emphasize a system that talks about speed and simplification. You know, really how to analyze what's there and break it down as quickly as possible. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about that, how to draw with speed and confidence, which is I'm going to start with an exercise I call single line sketching, just to get it as fast as possible. But we're going to go a little further with that into something I call 5-line sketching, or 5 cassette in French, 5 to 7 lines, where you can use a little more of a complex drawing to break down a scene. Okay, each basic element as a line. And then when we have our line drawings, these kind of quick sketches, the last thing I like to do is accent with dark brush marks for depth and a little bit of solidity, a little bit of hint at the kind of painting you might do later. So that's the last step, to come back with a brush pen. So these are really just very basic materials. Just a couple of pens is all you really need. So I like a nice thin line for this kind of stuff. So I'll use a fountain pen that has a very fine tip. This platinum carbon pen is a really nice one. It's what they call a Japanese fine. So it's even a skinnier line than you might be used to. The Lamy is a European fountain pen, and they come in fine or extra fine. That's an F that I have there. And all of these pens are the kind of fountain pen that uses a cartridge filling system. So I like these because I'm always reloading the pens, maybe with different colored ink. But that's really all you need, is just something that gives you a nice smooth line that you like drawing with, and is going to be a very quick, rapid, responsive kind of pen. So I don't like pencils or charcoal or anything that's more of a shading kind of thing. I like that smooth line drawing. And then when I use a brush pen, this is a Pentel. This kind of brush pen is what I'm always after. Something that has an actual brush type tip. It's a little fiberglass device. The brush has hairs in it, so you get very fine lines, or you can almost do dry brushing. So this is a fountain pen device that has a cartridge, but it's going to work like an ink brush. So those are the 2 things that I'll always carry with me, a brush pen like that and a fine line drawing pen. And that's really all you need for your walking around sketching sort of things. I'll use all kinds of sketchbooks, but just a small book and those 2 pens stuck in your bag. That way you can always have it with you. And there's no excuse like, I have to get my stuff ready, or I have to carry all this stuff. When you're going out with your friends and family on a trip, you just have to throw your book in your bag, and you're ready to go at all times. Because I find if you bring too much stuff, you always have this excuse like, oh, I don't want to bother with it. So I like to keep it simple. This is a sketchbook I bought when we arrived in Florence recently. So it's just, I don't even know where this paper is. It's kind of a recycled paper book. You just need a very basic little book you can do simple kind of line drawings in. I'll write little notations of where I am. This is the most simple kind of travel sketching, almost like a diary, notebooks, you know? So that's all you really need to get started with this and begin to explore your space. Here's one of the River Arno, and I have these little notes to myself like the Ponte Vecchio is down that way, and here's the best place to get a view at the right time of day. So I'm using this sketchbook to kind of plan my trip, but at the same time I'm writing little memories about the place. Yeah, that's here's a little street shot. So this kind of basic sketchbook you can have with you at all times, but you might later on want to work towards something where you're going to be painting. So I like a multimedia book for that, a kind of sketchbook where you can, you know that you can do a little watercolor wash on top. And that's where these exercises are going to go towards. We're going to start with these line drawings on the spot, and we're going to be working towards something that's more like a painting. So that kind of book will stand up. This is a Stillman and Byrne Alpha. So it's a sketchbook that'll stand up to some water. So after you're comfortable with the pen and ink and kind of the basic sort of drawing, you might want to invest in a more expensive book like this that you can finish later. So that's all you really need for your basic supplies. And I do carry a couple of ink cartridges for the pens, or I also carry little bottles of ink with me to refill those fountain pen cartridges on location. So that's the basic stuff. That's all you really need to get started with this. So let's get into some examples. What we're trying to do with this single line is get the thing that is most interesting about the scene drawn in one motion. And it's a bit of a mental game that I say you're going to use one line, and here's the rules. You put down the pen, follow the terrain, and make that sketch, and you don't pick up the pen. Just one continuous movement. Sort of related to what you might have seen people call blind contour drawing. And so the goal for that is to break yourself out of a couple of habits. I'm looking for a line that describes the form as quickly as possible. So when you're not allowed to pick up the pen, you won't make those little sketchy kind of motions where you're scratching away at a drawing. You just have to sort of start to see it as a single shape. And the other thing that it'll do is it'll let you outline the horizon line in kind of the cleanest possible description. So let me just show you what I mean. So I have my reference photo of the lighthouse over here, and this one's a good example because it's a very clean little horizon. It's easy to see the lighthouse is this interesting subject. We're in St. John's, Newfoundland, and of course the lighthouse is the first thing I want to draw. That's a very simple horizon. It's pretty clear what you want to do. I've just made these little marks to give myself a bit of space I'm going to aim for. So I just get started and move along the shapes here. I'm looking for, here, get this going. I'm looking for the contours of the earth to kind of build up. And then the base of this lighthouse, it's as simple as that, just a little shape. There's a little bit of okay. And into some of these details. So you see what I'm doing here is almost like a controlled sort of scribble, just a notation. I like to think of this as a ball of string maybe that's kind of just unrolling across the landscape. And what's the point of this exercise? To make these scribbly little drawings. Now clearly you could make a more sophisticated drawing on the spot if you wanted to. But the point of this exercise, that if you try this out a dozen times, 30 times, 100 times, you'll start to see the flow of it. What the point is to like keep your pen moving and capture the scene in the simplest possible just stroke. That feeling of continuous motion, it's going to play into the drawings later. You know, and I say one line, don't pick up your pen, those are the rules. But then I break the rules. It's okay, it's just a guideline. If you get stuck, or if you've drawn something that's a little bit off, I mean, maybe you'll go back and touch it up. Or if you're in the process of your drawing and you really get lost, just sort of stop and like look and figure out where you are. And you can just leave your pen hesitating and then come back and catch up a few things. So what does this kind of sketch teach us? When I talk about speed, the reason I'm worried about speed all the time is not to put you under some kind of stress, but because when you're traveling, you're seeing a million sights. And what you want to do, diving into the next one right away, just to do this while I talk, this is a set of cliffs off of Newfoundland. What you want to do with these kind of sketches is be able to see something so quickly that you don't even really have to stop the flow of your tour. You're traveling, you might be with other people. You're probably with your family, most people when they're traveling. So that's kind of the goal, is to be able to roll out these little sketches that are just like visual notations to yourself. So that's why I worry about speed all the time. Not that it's some sort of contest or that speed is inherently better, but just to give yourself the opportunity to see more things in a day. And there's another reason I'm into this. Let me just doodle. It's hard to talk and draw at the same time. So see, sometimes I might slow down and really try to get kind of a nicer contour. Here's where the turf meets the cliffs here. And there's a bunch of interesting shadow in there. So here I'm going to cheat. I told you not to pick up the pen, don't do that. But there's my one line. So it's a very a scribbly little sketch of that set of cliffs. I could probably do a better job on that, and I will. So the other reason I talk about speed, and the other reason that I like this type of exercise for you to do in a practice thing in your sketchbook is that it forces you to simplify what is the basic shape of this cliff without getting into any of the kind of picky little details of the foliage or the terrain. It forces you to simplify, it forces you to see the thing into large shapes and not to get bogged down into, tiny little detail. And this will help you when you start to think more like a painter. And it'll help you with the whole issue, the whole problem with travel sketching is seeing the world and staying moving and having fun and not feeling like you're doing your homework while you're on vacation, not feeling like I have to get a perfect photographic rendition of something. Yeah. So this forces you, when you think like this, it forces you to be as simple as possible. It's maybe a little more of an elegant line representation of that scene. And so that forces you to do that kind of simplification. And after a few dozen of these, you'll start to get the hang of it. When to cheat and break your line, or when it's working for you, capturing that flow, that kind of curvature of the earth. Yeah, you'll get the hang of it as you go. Let me show you one more quick demo just of this. This is a very simple kind of concept, but I want to emphasize how it's the key to everything that we'll build on later. So here I have my third example of this kind of really quick sort of sketching is a little castle on a hill. This is a landmark, and you can see St. John's in the background of the photo. But what I like about this landmark is that you can see why you had your Northern Ireland, Scottish, English people coming to this landscape. It really just looks like I've been transported to cold, blustery England. So I'll start with just the terrain, the contour of that hill. Sorry, my pen's skipping on me here. The contour of this hill, and back in the distance there's a lake and another hill kind of behind. And I come right back and maybe I'll just put more details onto this tower. So by letting your line wander across sort of your field of view in and out of what's there, it's like searching for what's on the landscape that's interesting. Here's some tufts of, and I might slow down occasionally and get some stuff like this vegetation. Well, see, this is just a fun sort of way to break the tension and really just get a scene in just a few minutes. So you might say to your friends, you go on in and order food, I'm going to sketch on the street. Or go into the museum and I'll just stand outside and do 5 or 6 drawings. These little kind of note-taking, record-keeping of the event. So that's the exercise and the simplest approach. And the next step is to take it to a more really sustained look at the thing, breaking all of that horizon that I'm talking about into the elements in the drawing. So then I allow myself to use more lines. The single line is great fun, but in a real sketch, of course, there's probably a subject, a background, a foreground. So if you give yourself a limit of like 5 to 7 lines, then you can really begin to analyze. So with those kind of single line drawings, you see how that smoothness of execution, that's the thing I want to take away from that exercise. That's a great thing to practice in just a little small notebook that you can put in your pocket. Do one of these drawings in 2 minutes, 30 seconds even. But eventually you're going to want to do something that's a little more complicated. So we want to keep that sense of simplicity and speed. We don't want to slow down because we're trying to do a better job. It's sort of counterintuitive. You think like, okay, this one's going to be good. I'm going to take my time. And then what happens is you stiffen up and you don't really capture the scene. So let's try to apply this same process to a little more complicated drawing. This is my test sketch. So in this reference photo I have here, again, from our trip to Newfoundland, we have a boathouse sort of dock situation. It's a wonderful rustic little scene. But when I look at the lighthouse, I see one straight horizon line that I can capture as a picture. And here I have this big element on the side that's quite detailed, a foreground, and of course there's some sense of a background environment around that. So I like to call this thing 5 to 7 line sketching, or in French we'd call it 5 à 7, which is a little bit of a joke because in Montreal 5 à 7 is when you get a drink after work. It's your happy hour. So in this kind of drawing, I like to think I'm going to use one line for each major element instead of for the entire drawing. It's a way of thinking, what are the biggest shapes that are out there? There's of course an infinite number of things to draw, and if you sit there and try to capture all of them, you'll just, as I say, bog yourself down in the process. So by thinking, how can I get this entire structure in one line, which you probably can't, but as a rule of thumb, it helps you simplify that. And it helps you think about the big blocks of color as well. Because we're just doing these sketches right now, but the idea is we're seeding our sketchbook. We're filling it up with stuff that we're going to work on all throughout our vacation. So, okay, so let's dive in and try this one. So what I have in this scene is, I'm just going to set up a framework, is this boathouse. It's kind of the most obvious, interesting thing. So I just want to let the pen line find the terrain of that house. And I'm treating it like it was a mountain, like the cliff with the castle on it, or like it was my lighthouse, just that it's a, what are the big outlines of the shape and how do they break up? So there's kind of this odd structure here, these. So that's the outline of the thing. Now I've already used more than one line on this, but like I said, it's a guideline. But let's come back in and see how I can add this door. And I'm purposely not worrying about being too perfectionist here. And you'll see as we work on these sketches, each step that we add to the sketch refines what you've got there before. So these little notations, they have to be really quick. Little fast little notations, but you'll come back later and give yourself the opportunity to correct a few things. So I'm not going to worry about, for instance, every bit of this. It's sort of a ladder, makeshift ladder. I'm not going to worry about getting the right number of rungs, or particularly concern myself with the perspective on it. Here there's a set of rocks in the foreground that I'm just going to put in very quickly. Just a shape, it's just a silhouette. One line for that shape, that was an easy one. And then let's get at this idea that there's sort of a boat dock here. So I like to just look at the thing and let my eye trace along the contours of what's there. So here's the boat hull. The boat has these little windows on here, and there's maybe some stuff on the back of the boat. We'll see him, and there's a sense of a shadow underneath that thing. Yeah, so this little scribble that fills in, suddenly a shape begins to appear. And I could start noodling, but I don't want to. I just want to get on to the next shape. Back here, there's another set of docks. And this stuff is way in the distance. It's just sort of visual noise. But there's another boat out there, which is a little icon I could like to get. So I'm looking for a graphical representation of the scene like that. One line to put in the background, and another to come back in for the, there's a hill back here on the horizon. And I just want to make this line like a little staccato. There's little opportunities to put a few things, like there's a pole on there and some sense of the terrain. So you can see what I was doing with those single lines, or I was getting the entire scene in one line. I'm trying to keep that sense of rhythm, that sense of flow, so that my sketch just builds very quickly to a conclusion. I'm looking to simplify it into the most basic description, and I'm leading myself kind of a bit of a sense of what are the boxes that go around the big shapes. That's a big red house. This is the water, which in this case is gray, and the sky is gray, but maybe I'd make the sky a little bluer in the sketch. But each of those lines defines an area that describes the world. But it was still pretty fast. It only took me a few minutes to execute. You could go faster if you weren't talking while you were drawing. So that's how we'd take that single line sketching and push it a little further. So We're going to talk about the brush pen, the darks. I really think this is the finishing touch. We've been traveling around making these quick little sketches in your notebook. It's the kind of thing you do while you're waiting for the bus or you're on your lunch break. But the line itself, while very descriptive, doesn't have a lot of weight. So I like to use the brush pen to come back and add these darks. I don't really think it's finished till I have some contrast in the drawing. So if you look at this, one of my ready-made examples of the lighthouse. So here it is with the dark brush marks added. So it's sort of a little network of accents that go right on top of your line drawing. And they just follow along the contours of the line and you look for places to accent. So part of it is just what is out there in nature. There's going to be darks in things like the rocks or the windows and doors of a building always have a dark shape. But part of it as well is the use of weight. In a line drawing, if you look back at the very lightweight individual line, everything kind of has the same weight of interest. But when you put the dark in it, you're drawn, I think, automatically to the developed area, the area that has that black brushwork. It's like the dark brush is like a magnet for your eye, contrast. It's natural for humans to look at both detail and contrast, and of course bright color, which will come later. So I want to put those contrasting elements in little ways that accent my drawing. And you just look for what's out there in nature and find the opportunity to design with that. So if you think about our castle on the hill, these individual sketches, these single line sketches that I might do, I probably won't finish every single one of them that I do. But I go through my sketchbooks, and when some of them turn out, some of them don't, those are the ones I'll come back to and hit with those darks. But so it's a way of also putting emphasis on pages in your book. Some pages just flip by, and then you get a page where the dark sketching is done, and that catches your eye. So it's a pacing element you can use in your sketchbooks as well. But so here what I've done is the way this hill led up to the castle and kind of all of that bracken that's out there, that heather, it sort of struck me as this Scottish looking environment, and I wanted to play that up. But I also wanted to use the darks to make a real directional flow through the sketch. So this is the simplest kind of painting. You're just using one color, black, but you're doing all of the tonal stuff, the tonal design that you do in a painting with just these little ink accents. So that's really why I think it just pops the sketch together for me. Gives you the weight to drag your eye, gives you the solidity of what objects are heavier, what objects are casting shadows, because they're three-dimensional. But it's all about that compositional element with the darks. So let's do one. I'm going to go back to my boathouse. So this is the example in progress. So in this scene, there's a lot of nice dark because it was an overcast day and there's a big black shadow cast under that thing. So that's a big obvious area. But of course, I'm going to use them. I'm using a brush pen. I showed you the Pentel brush pen earlier. This one is a Kuretake. It's a Japanese brush pen. But it has that same aspect of that it's like a real brush, that you can make small marks or you can make a larger broadside kind of marks with the brush and just hit an area in one touch like that. So inside windows and doors, there's almost always a darker sort of shape, those accents that are in the internal space. So these are things that I know that I can hit. And ideally, I like to do this brushwork. Of course, it's a natural part of the sketch. You're sketching with your pen, and then you switch up to the brush, get some accents, back to your pen maybe. The best possible thing is that you're going to get it all in one drawing. But sometimes, your things happen and you're interrupted. So this is also the kind of thing that you might be able to come back to and get later. These dark accents, even weeks later. But the sooner you do it, the better it's in your mind, it's in your memory. So the best possible case is that you're going to get it while you're there on location. So while I was doing all these little scribbles, I made these little kind of marks where there's windows or things. And I was just looking at where's their texture, where's their points of interest that I can pull out. So those were little clues, like there's a bit of a tree back here. Actually, I missed a whole hill back here in the distance. So it's not cheating to come back and add a little bit more. So, and I'm going to do this, cheat a little bit. The siding on this thing, all the little horizontal lines in the siding are they show the weathering to me. So let's get some of that in. even these little small things, sometimes the brush accent is just a small little thing, just to say there's a cast shadow here, like under the rails of this ladder, or in the little cracks and crannies on this siding. So see how it starts to really draw you into the three-dimensionality of that guy? And the mass, where something casts shadows. So let's get right into this ladder. So to build this complex shape, this is painting like you're going to do with watercolor later on. You're looking at a thing, I have just this scribble left there, but there's actually more of a little complex structure to that. The ladder has internal pieces. So I'm looking at it and trying to draw the negative spaces that I see inside that. It's a very complex object, this thing that's sort of sewn together. So I just want to build up a little network of these little shapes, and I'm just basically looking at what do I see, where do I see a dark and where do I see a light. So the top of the rails of these ladders, they leave a little light behind. So by spotting the holes inside an object, I can build that shape with these little darks. And I want to leave a little bit of a sense of there's a rope. There are these ropes coming out of, one of the great things about the seaside is all of this nautical stuff that's around. But let's get at this big dark shape here. There's something that's, I don't know if this is foundation, kind of piers inside this thing. So again, I want to leave little white glints behind. I don't want to fill a solid black object. So I'm using the brushwork to grow this shape. And that's a phrase I like to use, growing a shadow shape. Sort of starting from where there's a hard edge in the shadow and expanding outwards. And I like to do that because, well, you'll see when we get to watercolor, when you're painting your sketches, this is a very natural kind of method of doing a watercolor wash. So by drawing with the pen in the same way that I draw with watercolor, each drawing I do is a bit of training for the color that's going to come later, a bit of practice with your painting. So it's kind of nice to have a system that you rely on. So there you go, putting that shadow under that thing instantaneously said there's depth, there's space under there, volume. And then I want to feather off these kind of bold shadows. So when I want to draw a finer mark, I'm just going to use just the tip, just to get in with just the point of the brush and make little dots and dashes, as compared to when I'm laying it on the side. And there's a tendency to want to draw in the direction, kind of the direction of the mark. And when you can get a very fine sort of control over where thick and thin appears with your brush strokes. Probably don't want to put too many darks out there, right? I want to create the emphasis into this foreground. And with water, you don't want to get too bogged down. With water, you could go endlessly with drawing all these little shapes, all the little wave ripples in the water. Like you might even give a line to that. Get these kind of wave ripples in. But you don't want to try to draw every one. Simplify it, remember? Reduce it to kind of the graphic representation to that, because you want to create a shape that is water, that has a little bit of pen texture that I'm going to come back later on when we get to the color. So that's how the darks really pop that scene out. For me, I feel they really come together when you get to that. It's the finishing touches. And I know when I have that sense of where the light and dark is, that's the simplest possible painting. So later, if I come to add color, I know it's going to work. It's going to hold together visually, and I'm going to remember what is the direction of the light. What did I see at that time? What is it that drew me to the contrasts? So these notations are everything you need to take with you to the next step. So you want to practice this. So for your homework, single line sketching, this small little sketchbook where you just make one line and try to get the horizon to capture what it is that's interesting about a street or a view. Do a bunch of those and just get comfortable with it. And then you can try some more complex subjects where you give yourself 5 or 7 or more lines if you need it, and break each composition down into its key elements to get their own line. And then when you come back and do the darks on top of them, you'll see that they become little paintings. Give it a try. I hope you enjoy it. And on to the next lesson, where we're going to talk a little bit more about being painterly. The whole goal is for you to get your sketches towards color. So I'm going to talk about drawing with silhouette shapes and how to think like a painter even while you're sketching with a pen.